Bobby, you want to introduce Bill, please?
Speed. Oh, me introduce
Yes,
Bill.
you can introduce Bill.
This is my friend Uncle Bobo, or otherwise known as Bill Graham. Or no, let me say that again while we're still rolling. This is my friend Bill Graham, affectionately known to those who know him dearly as Uncle Bobo.
Somehow, no one's ever been able to understand and appreciate the difficulty of dealing with that which you invented. I think it was in San Diego some years ago.
Yeah, for your
Stage,
birthday.
and said something, well, we don't have a birthday present for Bill, so we're going to give him this name. And it's hard for anybody to imagine what it's like to drive across the bridge, and there's a car going the other way, and somebody just yells out, "Hey, Uncle Bobo!" Or running through an airport. It's something I've never really got used
Go,
to.
Uncle Bobo.
I think it's a term of it's a positive term.
It's a term of endearment, for sure.
Well, I'm going to try to find one and give it to you and see how you handle that.
No, I mean, we all do it. You see a line, have no idea what it's for, but your brain is like, should I join it? It's crazy, right?
Hey, let me call you back. I got to stand in a line.
Even crazier is that folks stick with insurance that keeps them waiting around to file a claim, while Geico's claim support is available day or night. I mean,
Beyond that, let's see.
I'm going to try to find one and give it to you and see how you handle that.
Beyond that, let's see. We should go back to early years in some. One of my first memories of, aside from the guy with the clipboard at the Trips Festival, way back when, we were playing for Bill one time at the Fillmore Auditorium. I think we were playing with the Byrds, and he was waiting for one of the Byrds to show up. I can't remember. I think it was McGuinn. And you were pacing around on the sidewalk, wearing that golf cap that you had, and pacing up and down, waiting for McGuinn to show up. And just obviously, McGuinn was late. The show was late, and around the corner came McGuinn with a girl on either arm. And I've never seen anybody actually do this in real life out of sheer anger. He took his hat off, threw it on the pavement, and stomped on it. And, jumped up and down on it and started raving at McGuinn, who, of course, hurried in and played. I've also been late and been subject to Bill's wrath as well.
But see, it takes years to learn from your own mistakes, and it took me a long time to realize that anger had to be contained in rock and roll, and it took me many years to realize that if somebody was late like that, rather than let all his wrath out immediately, to hold it in, because then you could upset the artist. But then afterwards, then you get him after the show is over. And the turning point was years later, in the early 70s. Hendrix was very late. He had met some femme fatale at the hotel and had things to attend to, and was very, very late for the show. And he got to the Fillmore, and I stood in front of the building, opened his cab, and I said, "Hello, Jim. How are you?" And I held it in. He was fine. He said he apologized for being late. He came in and did the show, and then after the show, we closed the dressing room door, and he got it then. And I learned to do that after the show, but there always had to be a time to unleash it.
I'm not late that much anymore.
No, most. That's pretty amazing. It's taken a long time, but most musicians really have their stuff together now.
Yeah.
Especially the dead, which is miraculous. When you look at the.
If that's together, I'll take vanilla. But anyway, I know more than perhaps I should, or perhaps I should tell.
I'll tell you, I was at the show last weekend in Ventura, and I went to the mixing board to say hello to Healy, and looked behind the mixing board, and there on a Sunday afternoon in Ventura, California, I got that dose of not acid, of exhilaration, and it's just miraculous and very pleasing to know that kind of thing still goes on, that a band like the Grateful Dead goes into a space, puts up their PA, no frills, no strobe lights, no tight pants, no fancy production on the stage, and a whole area containing 10,000 people just has a good time. The area behind the mixer is where you can't see the band from, and therefore that becomes the dance floor.
Right.
Because in other places, people are standing in place, watching the band, looking at the musicians, sort of moving in place. But behind the mixer, it's open, free form.
Right.
And somebody else may say, well, what's the big deal about people dancing? And watching them and seeing the open spirit, if people want to know what was nice about the 60s, most places where there was rock and roll were that way. And now you've got to find them. Where the Dead play, or where some of the other bands, not just the Bay Area bands, where they play good partying music, but where the people feel that way. And it was an amazing experience for me, again. And every time I see that, I say, thank God that it still exists. And that, to me, exemplified a good deal of what the 60s were. Get together, time out world, time out troubles. Let's just get together and have a good time. And then when the day is over, we go back to our...
People used to dance. That's one thing that I've noticed is back in the early days when we first started touring even, we'd show up at a place, we'd sit up on the stage, we'd play, and the people in front of us were dancing. That all changed at Woodstock, where everybody was focused. It was an amphitheater, a natural amphitheater, and everybody was focused at the stage. And for some reason, that stuck. From then on, everybody just came and watched the show, except for at a few scattered shows where you get dancing in the back and stuff like that.
Because the media, you can pinpoint Woodstock. The media then said that you guys are famous. This is important, that we better be looking for something more than what we're feeling. I think that's the basic difference with people going to shows now. They go to an event, and the people next to them bought tickets to see that particular show, and they stare at the stage as opposed to saying, let's do something with that space. The Dead shows do that. That's what interests me.
Yeah. I wonder how many people dance at the Michael Jackson shows. We started off as a dance band, and I think dance is probably good for you. But...
Well, the good, interesting thing, the thing that you read, I'm glad to see that things have gone safely at the Jackson events, but they said people just sat there pretty much in shock at the stage and the pyrotechnics on the stage, and that nobody got up and really moved until the end, and they applauded, and it was a great event. And I'm sure that Michael and the brothers performed very well, and because they're very talented. But it was much more in awe than any participatory event. And that's one of the aspects of rock and roll that I always enjoyed, that there was seemed to be participation. Especially, now you may not want to hear this, I've always, to this day, after all these years, I'm still amazed at people coming to a Dead show, and they'll stand in the audience and I'll walk through, because I'm always fascinated by who they are, what comprises a Dead audience, and somebody will say, hey, Phil lost weight, or Bobby looks different. They never met you. They never met the members of the Grateful Dead, but they will talk about them in familial terms after years and years of going to their shows, which is highly complimentary, I think, of the band, because that attitude is there. That, again, is part of what I always liked and continue to like about the 60s. When people talk about the good old days, they're right. They were great days.
yeah, well, that was good times. The International Institute of Good Times. We hit Ashbury.
How many times that happens now that either the media or people who've been around for a while say, is that ever going to happen again? You know, is that spirit ever going to come back? Something's going to have to make rock and roll small for it to happen again.
Yeah.
Because it's become such a corporate structured business, and the desire to get into rock and roll now has to be different, because a person getting into rock and roll today sees the potential of what they can become materialistically. You guys in the mid 60s went into rock and roll because that's what you guys enjoy doing. So, and there's a huge difference.
There's a fairly healthy club scene around here in Berkeley, in Athens, Georgia. A fairly healthy club scene in Los Angeles, so that's more music biz oriented. But say Berkeley, Athens, Georgia, the Boston area, and some parts of New York, people are into it to see how far into it they can get, rather than to see how much money they can get. In many cases,
I hope you're right. But you can't make believe that the real world doesn't exist, and therefore, when a band is getting together in a garage these days, if nothing else, think of one thought that's in their mind that wasn't in your mind and in the other guys, and therefore you were freer to really concentrate on the music. Right now, a band is forming. If nothing else, you know what they're thinking about? Now, about the video that we're going to do.
All
Just the
right.
thought of the video and the album cover and the packaging and hitting the road and the commercial, and maybe we can get sponsorship. When a band started in the 60s, I'm not saying it was better or worse, it was just those times. God, we're going to Reno. I mean, Reno. When you guys first went to anywhere 100 miles outside of San Francisco, heavy duty.
Yeah.
Today, the eye of the manager is towards international touring success. So,
We're going to do the Asian tour. Can't forget the Asian tour.
and the outfits, and the clothing,
Right.
and the stage presentation, and the production, which has become such a large part of rock and roll, rather than just let's really start with the music. Looking like Little Feat. I mean, you told me before the trouble that they had getting out because primarily they were good music, and there wasn't that much happening on the stage.
Well, there are a lot of clubs over in Berkeley, for instance, these days where there are bands who are just into it. If I can say it that way.
You're talking about a local scene that may exist in six or eight cities in America.
Yeah.
New Orleans had that for a while. Detroit had that for a while. Chicago for a while. But the even going on the road, I have great respect and admiration for many of the bands that get out there. But there aren't too many who just say, let's throw the rules to the winds.
Yeah.
And what you guys have always done, and what some of the bands have done. If it was Janis or Santana or Moby Grape, or what I liked about that time, there was no, for one thing, there was no clock. There was just no. It worked against you also, because for an 8 o'clock ticket, sometimes you'd say, well, let's start at 8:30. Or why? Well,
Well, because at 12 o'clock they're going to pull the plug because there's a local ordinance, and Bill and his people of his ilk hadn't learned how to work with the fire marshal or the local city fathers to sort of fudge that, and so the cops would show up and pull the plug.
we had a turning point. I remember in this is on the ages. I never thought I'd say these things. Well, in the old days. In '67, it was Pigpen's birthday, and the Dead and the Airplane were playing at the Fillmore, and Joan Baez and her sister and her
Right.
mother were in the audience, and it was decided that why don't we just invite everybody on, and Joan and Mimi came down, and you guys started singing In the Midnight Hour, and
Right.
went on and on and on. And Walter, the sergeant from the beat, a miserable human being, he looked for every little thing to bust me. He came in at about 5 minutes to 2, and the place was jumping. Everybody had a great time. Nice. And I remember I'd said at about 10 minutes to 2, okay, folks, we have to close the front door. It's not a private party, so just be cool. And 5 minutes to 2, Walter came in. He says, well, this has to end at 2 o'clock. And I explained to him that it was Pigpen's birthday, and listen, it's a celebration. Why can't you relax? Then this line that I used forever came out. I says, don't you understand the difference between the law and justice? I know what the law says. The law says 2 o'clock, page 9, paragraph 2, whatever. But justice is the spirit and the feeling of the place. So I don't care about the goddamn justice. And comes 2 o'clock, he was going to bust me. So when we were in the kitchen in the side room, and I just freaked out. I said, God, bust me, shoot me, but you're not stopping the show. And I went insane. And he finally says, just relax. And he thought I was going mad. And he let us go till about 2:25, something like that. And he said, weeks and weeks later, he said, these ain't bad people. They're really okay. And little by little, Walter and I became relatively humane with one another. But that was the joy of the exploratory 60s. Without them, all of it for me wouldn't be worth it.
Well, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, we could still have corporate rock and roll, but it'd be different. It would sound substantially different.
It was the first. Everybody was trying their thing for the first time.
Right.
Whatever you were doing, whatever we were doing. The sound guy tried to build better sound systems. We were trying to figure out how do you do security without looking police-ish.
Right.
How do you advertise without looking like you're an advertiser?
Right.
It was a great joy to watch people go down the street, see a poster against the building, and try to figure out what it said. And that it all progressed out of that is fine. But anybody knocks anybody who did anything in the 60s, I always said, well, there were no blueprints. That was the first. I don't care if it was Woodstock. I had many negative things to feel because I was there and some things weren't done. But it was a first. It was an attempt at getting this whole thing out there. And there were a lot of people involved in that who really meant to do good things. Look at Bear. Look at his early days with your PA.
Look at our fiasco at Woodstock with his PA. He decided he wouldn't use the Woodstock PA because he didn't like it, so he used our horribly inadequate one and didn't ground it properly. So every time I touched the microphone or my guitar, I got a shock. But every time I touched both, I got a big blue one that would send me 6 feet and knock me out, put my lights out. I only did it once or twice.
Well,
we're supposed to talk about San Francisco music and how it differs in general, if at all, from other places. And it occurs to me that one thing about San Francisco music is the music is built around groups up here, rather than perhaps individuals or studio heavies that fall together, like in New York or Los Angeles. A lot of groups get together up here of people no one's ever heard of and become famous after a while.
I think one thing that should be put to rest is years ago there was much made about the San Francisco sound. I don't think there ever was a sound. Then the Boston sound came on, the Chicago sound.
Right.
There was a Philly sound and a Detroit sound when it came to R&B and the way they were produced. But there was never a sound. I think there may have been a spirit, and the spirit was, hey, let's just make some good music and party and have a good time. But not a sound. The scene that's nice here is that the Bay Area has born in it, and the Bay Area also gathers from other areas musicians and artists, and filmmakers and poets and writers. I've always thought, with no disrespect intended, that the Bay Area becomes a resting place for professional rejects. People from other parts of the country. I was a frustrated character actor out of New York, and I came here to visit my sister in Stady, and I said, my God, if you're going to fail anyway, this is a great place to not having made it and start all over again. And I think many people feel that way. You think of the musicians who live here now, who came here from other areas. It's an amazing list, going back to when the first guy was Michael Bloomfield out of Chicago, and then Janice out of Texas. But there were floods of musicians who were born here. I mean, yourself, the Cipolinas and Garcia. And you get all that together, and you look at where we live, and the extent to which the law allows us to live this way. The law, that doesn't mean that they let us walk down the street bare-assed smoking hash, but they allow you to live with dignity and with respect for privacy. Well, you add that to the nature of the land here. Who wouldn't want to live here? And that creates a melting pot of creativity, and it extended to the rock and roll community. And I think that still exists today when you have the Keystone Clubs and Uncle Charlie's here and Ivy's and Ruthie's, and you've got an amazing openness within the musical ranks. Look at Huey Lewis, who finally broke now.
Right.
People, somebody said in New York, wow, he's that new guy, huh? New guy, sure. 13 years in the Bay Area.
In the Bay Area.
With Clover, goes to England, played with back to Elvis Costello, came back here. And now, on times off, you'll still see him playing with a grab band on Monday nights at Uncle Charlie's.
Right.
You see Garcia or you or some of the other guys playing with some other bands at the Keystones or Wolfgang's or some other places.
Well, it's a neat place. There are a lot of little clubs. There are a couple of big universities, a lot of smaller universities around here. San Francisco's always had a fairly loose reputation. I mean, since it started, and it's a good place for musicians to come and fall together, or artists of one sort or another.
But underneath it all, what you don't have is suppression. If you think back to the earlier times, that if you had something to say. When I first came here, there are two things that impressed me the most. That the Sproul Plaza in Berkeley. You can get
Yeah.
out there and read out of a Walt Disney book, or talk about the political beliefs and disbeliefs that you had. And at the same time, there was on Grand Street in North Beach, when I first got here, there was a place called The Place. And every Monday night, you could walk into this little bar, and there was a little platform in the back with a cheese box on it. And for $1, you got 5 minutes to get in that cheese box and say anything you want. And they could tear you apart, and they can have an open discussion with you. And I remember this one night, this guy got up on this cheese box, and he had this paper bag and this bottle in there, and he took the bottle out of the bag, and it had this green liquid, this yellow liquid in it, and he said, well, I'll tell you what my plight is. I'm trying to raise enough money. I need $120 to go on work on the sailboat that's going to the South Seas, and I ain't got a gig, and so I'm selling my urine to this bank, and I need X amount for $5 for this jar. Will you help me fill it up? I thought he was absolutely hilarious, and the guy there said, well, that's common, the things that happen in this place. From the insane side to the very prophetic side, those things for me are at the heart of San Francisco. For me, that you're allowed to function, that the law gives you more space here to make your statement. If you're a bricklayer or you're a musician or you're a rock and roll promoter, and if it wasn't for that, none of us would be. First of all, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't have gotten off the ground because they would have busted us wide open.
Yeah, that's true.